Howdy, guys, gals, and non binary pals. This is the Tales from the Waystone Summer Reading Program.
We are your hosts, Will and Phoenix. Let's get into it.
Welcome to the first installment of the Summer Reading Program. It's time to play Ring of Fortune, where we'll be reading the prologue through Chapter 3 of Travis Baldree's Legends and Lattes.
We have my standard, let's see how fast I can read this. Each week we'll be examining a section of Legends and Lattes and figuring out what we can take from the text and apply to our real lives. We'll also take time to focus on a phronemus of the week, and then we will share a recommended thing of the week. Finally, we'll wrap things up with 7 words from the book and 7 words from our own lives. We are keeping the format, guys, gals, and non-binary pals. Before we begin, let's get some disclaimers out of the way. First of all, we are in no way affiliated with Travis Baldree or his publisher, Tor Books. Granted, because he worked on Torchlight, there is a chance that I have met him.
Yeah, it's a small world, right?
The game industry is tiny, and I worked in the game industry around the time that some of the Torchlight games were being, I think probably 3, was still being made. But I also went to school at a video game college for learning how to make video games. So it's very possible that he showed up at one of the lectures at some point, because I'm sure that if I've never met him, at least some of my professors have met him or people that know him. So there's that, but that's like it. Although, again, I might have also been at conventions with him. I'm not sure. Regardless, we aren't affiliated.
Second of all, our discussions are naturally going to assume that you've read through the end of Chapter 3 of Legends and Lattes. I've finished this entire book as well as its follow-up Bookshops and Bone Dust, but Phoenix hasn't, so we'll be keeping our spoilers to a minimum.
Isn't Bookshops and Bone Dust a prequel?
Yeah, kinda.
Okay. Also, a word to our community, please be kind to yourselves and one another and the creators of the worlds that we love exploring. Notable exceptions do apply, and I am going to address this once and only once. I've gone through and scrubbed what I could find that had us talking about Neil Gaiman. I just don't wanna.
Kindness doesn't mean you have to platform people who are abusers, though.
This is accurate. I'm just putting it out there that we have chosen to remove anywhere that we have platformed him. We waited until we got more information. We got more information and it makes us sick. So we're getting rid of it. It's going to be off of the Patreon probably by the time that you hear this. I just wanted to leave the last couple episodes that we did about Sandman up for the one person who pays for it until the next one gets posted, which is this one. Anyway, I don't want to start our summer reading program off this way, and so I'm not going to. That's all I want to ever say about that.
All right, so let's dive into Legends and Lattes. High fantasy and low stakes.
Absolutely. So here's the deal. Right now, I want cozy books.
This book is cozy as
Fork. Yeah, I want high fantasy and low stakes. I want things that some people might describe with the word twee.
So the vibe that I get out of this is it's like watching a home improvement show that takes place in a high fantasy universe where you've got someone who comes in with plans for how to transform an old building and then goes through the work of realizing that. And it feels really satisfying to watch it. And then at the same time, there's wizards and
shirt. What I was trying to get to, though, is that I want to surround myself with stories that feel like a cozy sweater.
This is definitely one of those that does. And I think part of that coziness comes from characters who are kind to one another and also optimistic about possibilities. Like, coziness is about seeing something that looks difficult and finding a way to make something positive out of the situation and find comfort and joy in it.
Coziness does not have to mean free from conflict or free from consequences.
Right.
It can mean low stakes. It can also mean something that is emotionally wrenching, but everyone working towards the good outcome and not having prolonged periods of focusing on or suffering through the bad. So, there are some things that I enjoy that are go-to rereads or re-experiences that are not what I would call cozy. Like Game of Thrones is great.
Not cozy, though.
Not cozy. Also, King Killer Chronicle is not something I would call cozy, but it is wonderful, in my opinion. Obviously, we spent 5 years talking about it. But while the characters are comfortable and familiar to us, and getting back into those worlds is always kind of like finding new things to immerse yourself with, they're not comforting and like, I guess, does cozy kind of have to come with good feels?
I'm going to put forward a thesis here, and I'm going to see if you agree with it or not.
Okay.
I'm going to suggest that Lord of the Rings represents a classic cozy fiction, and here is why. So, it is characterized primarily by an emotional warmth between the principal characters. So, like for instance, even as Frodo and Sam are slogging through immense hardship and difficulty on the road to Mordor, the nature of their relationship is fundamentally in the warmth in which they regard one another. It's tested, but it's ultimately resilient. They find comfort in the affection that they share for one another and in doing kind things and considerate things for one another. It's not that they're always successful, but that core element of their relationship is a cozy relationship, even as the circumstances that surround them are distinctly not.
I think that that's a good point. I think what makes Game of Thrones distinctly not cozy is that everyone is backstabbing everyone, not everyone. And it's not necessarily to do with all the hardships. Because there are some relationships that feel loving and close and familiar and not gross uh, in the familiar. Arya and Bran. Like their relationship is very sibling bickery, but they still are close. Also Arya and Jon.
However, these characters spend the vast majority of their time separated from one another, and most of their adventures are solo.
This is true. But in the times when you get to see them, those relationships feel great. And I think what George R. R. Martin does that makes it feel distinctly not cozy is rips apart the good relationships and focuses in on very toxic relationships.
Yes, these characters are removed from cozy relationships and then forced into toxic ones with other characters, institutions, and the world around them.
And so that, while compelling and full of intrigue and a lot of theories and a lot of things that are still things I enjoy reading, it doesn't feel like that safe, cozy feel.
Right.
And in King Killer Chronicle, the very beginning, where Foth is talking about how he lived with his troop,
Cozy.
absolutely cozy, and then absolutely ripped apart.
Yeah, I think close relationships are all, again, about being ripped away from coziness, whether it's with his troop or with his friends at the university.
I think sometimes he holds himself at a remove that prevents those relationships from advancing into close and comforting. I think because he feels like everybody's going to be ripped away from him, he preemptively rips those relationships to shreds or puts a wall in front of them.
Preventing them from becoming truly cozy.
Right.
And we look at Kvothe's adventures, almost all of them are solo efforts. When he's actually moving the quote plot forward, it's things that he's doing on his own, whether that's going to Traben or his adventures in Ventus. All of that is about removing himself from his cozy place or any place that could become cozy.
From his comforting place. It's like the Aeolian and the university are kind of becoming familiar and becoming softer and becoming places where he can relax into as long as he follows the rules of the university.
I think really what we find though at like the university is it's less coziness and more just routine.
Maybe, but I think there's also some comfort in routine. Maybe not quite the I'm going to curl up with a hot cup of cocoa and my silliest D&D themed blanket cape or whatever, or if you have a tortilla blanket or whatever you've got that is just ridiculous and fuzzy and has the best texture and just makes you want to sink into it. And I think that when I'm talking about just wanting to be surrounded by cozy, I want those rough edges to be sanded down. And I think what it really does come down to is that, yes, there is hardship in some of these books. As you noted last time during my read through, my first read through, I probably will read it again, of the House in the Cerulean Sea. I cried and laughed and cried and laughed. And I think what was important was the laughter, because you do get heart wrenching things, but you get lifted out of them.
Yeah, like coziness is not the absence of hardship. It is something that helps you to endure hardships. It's about perseverance and ingenuity and finding connections that help you come out the other side. Like cozy things don't take place in the summer, right?
That texture wise for me, it's because it's sweaty.
Exactly. Cozy is for those times when you get comfy, it's cold and windy outside, and you make a safe place.
It's like a shield against the wind and the rain.
Yeah.
And it is why every year in like October, November, I get so excited to pull out my sweaters
Mhm.
and my slipper socks. But I think at this point, we do need to actually start talking about this book.
All right. So let's dive into the prologue of Legends and Lattes.
For someone who absolutely loves high fantasy and D&D and everything to do with like D&D the movie, very similar feeling to the beginning of this, right?
We mean Honor Among Thieves, not the one with Jeremy Irons, by
Oh
the
god, no, 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 no.
way. But yeah, this really starts off at the end of the last job for Viv. In fact, it ends with the killing blow. She is locked in mortal combat with a creature known as the Scalvert Queen, which I kind of feel like is this weird rat spider hybrid.
I have a really bad time with descriptions in books of trying to picture what is written on the page. I've had this problem forever. Sometimes I think it's my dyslexia, sometimes I think it's just not being able to pay attention directly to descriptive words, and I just kind of make something up. And so I have almost like a massive centipede in my head. I don't know why. Regardless, gigantic fantasy creature, malevolent, ostensibly.
So after the Scalvert Queen is dead, Viv cuts open her skull with her mighty greatsword Blackblood, which is just a great name for a sword.
I'm going to point out something. I'm not going to edit what you just did, which is the assumption that the right pronoun is a masculine one, even as you talked about it being a queen. I've noticed more recently as we've gone along, especially with fantasy books, because that's pretty much what I read, the effort is being made in sci-fi fantasy movies and TV shows and books very much to do away with the default being male and straight.
Yeah, we're going to really touch on that here as this series progresses, and I don't want to talk too much more about that for fear of spoilers.
The other thing to mention is that because we're so used to a cast of characters, let's say there are four, you've got three guys and one woman. That's generally the makeup of things. Non-binary people are starting ish to show up places. Sometimes we're just side characters or just one-offs or somewhere in the story so that we have representation. Yay. But because there's so very few of us, we don't get main character or part of the ensemble yet. However, most parties are like outweighed by men to like token woman. And sometimes there's two women and yay. And as long as that's not like we're going to make the women bicker at each other, also yay. But as we've gone on, I think we're seeing a swing towards equality, which a lot of people seem to, the wrong people, seem to be taking as taking away from the overall representation of male yay, to being like, oh, everything's all women and gay people. And I'm like, no, 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 count, literally count. It's leaning towards equality, and you're only complaining because you think it's taking away things from you instead of giving you an opportunity to see other perspectives, which I'm going to have to point out here. I have been seeing other perspectives. I have been kind of like, if I want to read anything in my preferred genre or if I want to watch anything, it's all been very male centric my entire life. And now it's starting to go back toward a pendulum swing of let's maybe sometimes be clunky about it, but let's at least acknowledge that if there's four people, two of them can be women.
Yeah, I mean, for the vast majority of my life, I have had the luxury of being able to open up 99% of the books in the local fantasy section of my library and find a protagonist who looks and thinks mostly like me. And, that's always been helpful for me because these have given me ways for me to think about how to move about in the world, how to think about culture, how to think about other people, et cetera, et cetera. And that's great. Nothing wrong with that. At the same time, there are a lot of people who don't look like me, who don't have the same life experiences, the same way of viewing the world, who have really had to work hard to build a head canon that kind of shoehorns in something like their own experiences out of these supposedly universal things that really aren't. So, what we're seeing now is that you have people who don't look like me, who don't think like me, writing things that are about their experiences. And I think that's good, specifically when I think about young people who are now able to find books at their local library that speak to their experiences. And that's a good thing. That's an unalloyed good thing. Full stop. I'm happy about this.
I will say that, yes, there have definitely been stories with women as the protagonists that I have grown up with, that I have enjoyed. Back in the 90s, when I started reading the Dragon Riders of Pern books, written by a woman, started in the late 60s. Great. Going back and re listening to them, progressive for the late 60s, does not mean our current sensibilities of what is progressive. Because even though you have a strong female character, TM, as the main protagonist of the first Dragon Rise of Pern, she is quite literally like narrating how she's assuming she's about to be abused by her partner, like deservedly going to be hit by him. And I'm like, oh, no, 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 this, no, no. And so, like, even if you try to point out some of these exceptions, you're still going to wind up with products of their time. And I think the product of our current time is a lot of authors trying to find their footing in the space that they find themselves wanting to be progressive and representing a lot of different experiences, and some of which they don't have personal experience with. And then you've also got a lot of, now I have to explain for the straight cis people. Let's go on.
All right. Yes. So anyway, where was I? Oh, yes. So Viv cleaves open the skull of the Scalvert Queen with her mighty greatsword Blackblood and pulls out sort of a stone from within the back of the beast's skull. And this is the only treasure she wants out of this whole thing. Mind you, there are loads of wagonfuls of treasure and belongings that the creature has stolen from the surrounding hillside, all wrapped up in webs, hence why I think of sort of a spider.
Also, Queen.
Yeah. So the rest of her adventuring party is kind of a little surprised by this.
About her rejecting the rest of the treasure and just leaving it to them.
Yeah.
It's the only thing she wants. So it's the only thing she takes. I can respect that.
They also don't know that this is her last job. She's got a plan. She wants to retire. She's sick of the murder hobo life.
Her back hurts. She's older. She's like us.
Yeah. She's hit level 20 and she's about ready to ride off into the sunset. She does not want her last hurrah to be a violent end. She's sick of perpetrating violence and being the victim of violence. She doesn't want that to define how she views the world. She's got other ideas for that. So let's go ahead and move to chapter 1. Viv, our protagonist, breaks camp over the city of Thune with a dowsing rod, the Scalvert stone, and we've got a verse. Well nigh to Thonic line, the Scalvert stone of fire draws a ring of fortune, aspect of heart's desire. So keep that verse in mind because it's going to explain a lot and it's going to provide a lens that Viv and everybody else is going to use that stone for.
Everybody else? Anybody who finds it and knows what it is? Or,
Yeah.
okay, I'm going to be real here. I have read about half of this book already. I read it a while ago, and then there's like this overarching sense of dread that I just couldn't get past. Hence, actually, part of why I wanted to have this be part of our summer reading program. I want to read the book. It's been recommended to me multiple times. You even said after you read it after I stopped that it's worth finishing. But part of it is just like there's that MacGuffin we have of the Scalbert Stone. And it seems like the Telltale Heart a little bit because she does hide it under a flagstone in her home.
And she's always worried that people will discover it.
Well, just so that we don't try to plot by plot this, I want to go more of a overarching view of it. I want kind of that zoomed out look at this. She expresses some things after having chosen her path. She is a person who researches and tries to make sure that she's going in the right direction with her life. But she also is unsure of herself, which is not something that you usually get with a description of an orc.
Yeah, she's aware of how people view her. She knows that she's large and imposing and she's carrying a
Badass.
greatsword. She knows how she looks and people give her wide berth even if they don't necessarily remark. So she's aware of the prejudices that people may have about who she is.
And so she chooses a place that is pretty cosmopolitan, that is pretty used to seeing adventurers of all shapes, sizes, and colors. And she follows a magical dowsing rod to the livery, a street off of the main street in this stereotypical fantasy city. Like it is definitely D&D city.
Absolutely. You know, you've got elves and dwarves and gnomes, orcs, tieflings, you name it.
Hobgoblins.
Yes.
And so it feels very much like a D&D campaign setting. The livery's like run down and she kind of figures to herself like whoever owns this is probably going to just be glad to get it off their books. And she's not wrong. Like there's not a whole lot of obstacles in her way right now.
Yeah, when she goes to meet Ansem, the current owner, he is pretty quick to recognize that Viv's offer is about as good as he's going to get. Offers like hers aren't going to come around very often and may never come around again.
And so while he tries to bargain, it's not really a big deal. But what my point is that we've got plot going on and story going on and potential challenges that turn out to be decently easily overcome.
The thing that I keep coming back to is when Ansem asks her what she's going to do with a livery, and she says, it's not going to stay a livery. I'm going to make a coffee shop. Things don't have to be the thing they start out as.
I really, really like the things don't need to be the thing they start out as.
This is true of both the livery, which is going to become a coffee shop, and it's also true of Viv, who is a murder hobo who's going to become a coffee shop owner.
In a fantasy world where coffee really isn't a thing.
Yes.
And that's the fun part about this. It's like taking this, as you say, murder hobo. Because let's face it, D&D parties.
Murder hobos.
All of us. That's what we are. We meet up in taverns and we go and kill.
Shirt. And then we move on to the next city. Do the same thing.
Find a mine. Go and murder whatever has taken up residence in it. Probably kobolds.
Except my character is a kobold.
Yeah, but we're not going off that direction. We're doing political intrigue in a city.
We're a higher class of murder hobos. We're just running a violent coup.
Shout out to our D&D group. Anyway, but the first setup of the story really does come down to the juxtaposition between this assumed violent person and her dreams, which are to create a cozy, loving, comfortable spot full of these smells that just make her melt.
And I think the thing that I get out of this is she doesn't want to just experience this. She wants to share this with other people. She wants to bring this sense of peace and warmth and happiness to a community.
And so she looks for companions and others to hire to help her, not to do it for her, but to help her revamp this livery into an actual structure, into an actual like restaurant building. And she finds a craftsperson rather than finding a hireling.
And she finds acceptance in all of this too. So let's go ahead and jump to chapter 2, where we can meet said craftsperson. So, after spending her first full night in the new place,
Which has a hole in the roof and a broken ladder, so she can't even get up to the loft where she's going to be sleeping.
yeah, it's kind of run down. It's seen better days,
Understatement.
but she sees the possibility and she's excited.
And I think that optimism is such a lovely thing to have at the beginning of your story. I know just from my knowledge of like narrative structure that even if you start off on an upswing and you have that optimism, you are going to come around a corner and have to experience something that isn't so loving and kind. But right now we're on the upswing. We're on that build up.
Well, and it's that optimism that helps characters persevere. Optimism is not the same as naivete. It's recognizing things for what they could be, for possibilities that you can make. Like, so I always think of in Unsleeping City 2 on Dimension 20, the character Sophia Lee has an epiphany where the monastic order that she belongs to, that follows this rigid code of it is what it is, which is kind of just this brutal acceptance of reality as sort of an unchanging thing. And she replaces it with it is what it could be. Seeing that there is a thing out there and you have a choice as to what you're going to do with it and how you're going to interact with it and what you're going to make of it. You have agency, you have the ability to persevere through something and transform something. The way things are is not the way things have to be. Things do not have to be the thing that they started out as. So that's built into the optimism there. Like that livery as it is now, yeah, it kind of sucks right now, but it won't always be right now. And with ingenuity and effort and vision, it can be something better.
And so I like how she goes about finding a person that she can work with to create what she wants to have her vision become. She carefully observes a lot of shipwrights down at the docks. She's curious about their craft. She is watching how they interact and how they work on what they're working on.
She notices one in particular, a hobgoblin who is kind of working off by himself. He probably does not get quite the same amount of respect because people have some prejudices about him. But she notices that he's thorough, he's careful, and even though right now the thing he's working on is just a dinghy, he is giving it the respect of his craft. He is being very careful with his measurements, with his motions. He's doing a good job, even though it is a small job.
He takes pride in his work. And to her, that's very valuable, especially as she is trying to realize a dream that not many people would understand. And so we come to find out the hobgoblin's name is Calamity.
He prefers Cal. It's a little shorter.
And also probably does not carry along quite the same weight.
Yeah, it's a little less ominous. But Cal is, he's a taciturn sort, doesn't talk a whole lot, mostly listens. And usually his only response is,
which turns out to be an affirmative and a positive thing.
Usually when we see Cal say, it means he's got an idea. He's listening to something, he sees a possibility, and he's happy to help. Like when Viv takes him back to the old livery and starts to tell him about what she's dreaming of making it into, at first she's really worried that he's going to mock her or think less of her.
Or tell her that this dream of hers is stupid and that she shouldn't pursue it.
And, well, he doesn't know what coffee is because nobody in Thune really seems to know what coffee is.
That's because, like, even through all of Viv's explorations and adventures, She has run into one coffee shop, and that's what started this whole dream off. One coffee shop, it was gnomish, and the visual juxtaposition in your head of Viv having to stand at the coffee shop because she smelled the smell of coffee and followed her nose to this little shop and fell in love with how that felt.
That first sip just is transformative. It put her at peace. It helped her kind of awaken her mind enough to clear it. Like instead of having chaos in her brain, she was able to relax and order things up and feel at peace with who she was. And that transformative first sip sets her on a path, right? And now she's starting to wonder, oh, I realize how ridiculous this looks. Who's going to want to do this? He's going to think I'm just some great big galoot who's trying to do some weird thing.
And mind you, she doesn't even have her coffee yet. The delivery hasn't been made. And instead of mocking her or deriding her dream, he just sits down with her and says, you know, your drawings are quite good. I can see where your vision is. I have no idea what you're doing, but I'll help.
He's got curiosity. He's like, okay, I see where you're going with this. I don't know what this particular thing is, but I know what a restaurant is.
Mm-hmm.
And, I'll take your word for it that this stuff is as good as you say it is.
But you also might want to have a way to, I don't know, make food.
In case the whole coffee thing doesn't turn out.
Exactly.
He's got a little bit of skepticism, but it's not towards Viv. It's not towards her idea. It's, oh, hey, yeah, I can see the bones of this place. I can see where those things right now that are horse stalls, well, we could lower those a bit and those become booth seating. And then, oh, yeah, we can put a big long table with bench seating to do sort of a communal area. Yeah, we can totally make that happen. All right, so let's start talking about what we'll need to do this.
And I love it. As someone who likes to build things and likes to take the bones of something and turn it into my vision of that thing, like even the room we're in, right?
I was actually thinking of just that when I read this book for the first time, thinking of the journey that we went on when we bought our home, just in general, where, when we first saw the place, it looked fairly generic.
Yeah. To be honest, it looked like the previous owners didn't do anything with it.
And they probably didn't. I kind of got the impression that the previous owners used it as a place to sleep in between their job.
Yeah.
And that's fair. If that's what you got the energy for, that's what you got the energy for. But we wanted something a little different.
And we're not done by any stretch of the imagination, but we are steadily making improvements and making the place how we want it.
Yeah. And part of that is going from a dream to a plan to execution. And so here we see Cal taking that dream and saying, okay, well, here's what we're going to need to do to actually have a plan for this. And then we're going to start on this. If you're willing to help out, I think we should be able to do this. And, I really love his attitude on all of this. He doesn't get flustered by the setbacks. Like he recognizes, oh yeah, this is going to be a lot of work, but it's solvable.
He takes it just a little bit at a time.
Right. I love the bit where he goes, you haven't asked how much this is going to cost.
And Viv's response is, I didn't figure you knew.
Like, I remember taking a project management course, and one of the first things that the instructor talked about was, so the thing about project management is we're doing something that we've never done before. We don't know how much a thing's going to cost, how long it's going to take. So especially at the outset, a lot of it is guesswork. Like every time you look at a public works project and it's behind schedule and over budget, well, that's because pretty much every time they're starting from scratch. They don't know how much it's going to cost. They don't know how long it's going to take. They're making educated guesses, which are probabilistic at best. And even if you've done things like it before, you never truly know what things you're going to discover along the way. So you kind of got to be willing to accept some risk, which Viv has amassed enough wealth over her adventuring career that she's willing to absorb some of that risk.
This isn't about her making a profit at her coffee shop. This is about her doing something she loves. So yeah, we do get a montage of let's clean out the place, let's get a whole bunch of deliveries, and before even that, like everything looks like it's gonna rain, and she's undeterred. And then Cal just steadily, helps her with things like put a tarp over the hole in the roof.
Put a ladder up onto the loft so that she'll have a place to sleep, and help make it a little bit more step by step closer to reality. But before that, we do meet one of the first real obstacles that she's going to encounter when a dapperly dressed stone fae appears at the door, refusing to introduce himself and expressing an interest.
So it turns out that Thune has what? A mob? What? What is it? Who is trying to, I don't know, extract money out of all of the shop owners?
It seems like an insurance racket known as the Madrigal, and everyone pays sooner or later.
Nice shop you got here. It'd be a shame if someone burned it down.
Yep. Viv, of course, does not take too kindly to any of this because, well, she doesn't like being pushed around. And, she is used to being the one who pushes. Her entire adventuring career, she has made through the strength of her arms, the sharpness of her sword, her capacity for violence, and she does not like it when people feel like they can just threaten her.
So there's our kind of first introduction to conflict.
And there's also an ominous thump on the roof as she goes to sleep at night, and the sound of something scratching at the tiles.
That may have contributed to my desire to avoid overarching doom. One other thing we didn't talk about that I do want to mention. After Cal goes home, Viv doesn't want to be alone. And so she seeks out at least other people, maybe not necessarily company, but she also wants to discover the places around her new home.
The thing that got me about this is the first time that she's actually had a home.
And so she wants to find a place to eat, and she finds a local pub and has a conversation with the pub's owner. Hey, how long have you been here? Was business good when you first started? How did you make it? No, I'm not a threat to your business, I promise. In fact, actually, she might be able to help his business because if people come to her shop, like if she's just got pastries and coffee, it's not like that's a meal, that's a treat. But then they discover his pub and they remember to come back.
I love how she asks, well, did you have a lot of crowds at first? And he goes, oh no, not at all.
In fact, actually, no. I almost had to go out of business and then I lost more money and really almost had to go out of business. And then I lost a little bit more before it went back up.
And now I lose just enough money to get by.
Which is such a poignant look at the restaurant business.
Yeah, the margins are thin.
If you want to be a good employer, you're going to have to share your profits with your staff and not expect them to work for peanuts.
And, there's also going to be the reality that in order for you to equitably share your profits, you may not be able to afford to hire as many people as you need to meet demand.
But transparency is a thing.
It's hard, but it's fulfilling. It's pretty clear that the pub owner is doing this as much because he delights in bringing joy to people's lives, giving them a hearty, healthy meal after a long day, to give them a break from the monotony, to treat his guests with kindness and warmth. It is something that provides him with pleasure and fulfillment.
And I think that it's a lovely mirror to what Viv's life could be.
And it also prepares her to know that, she's going to have to make some sacrifices.
It might be a struggle.
Won't be easy, but it's worthwhile. It's worth doing. She can have a place that will be filled with warmth and kindness and joy as well, with some investment of time, money, and labor. None of it will be free. None of it will be without sacrifice, but it will be worth it.
And so, just to reiterate, I think we've gotten to the end of this section quite nicely, but I want to do a little bit of housekeeping. We did separate the book into 7 parts. Obviously, this first part was the prologue through the end of chapter 3. Our next episode will cover 4 through
8.
And then we've got 9 until the end of 14. Then we start on 15 and go through 19. We've got 20 through 24, 25, and end right before the epilogue. So we're going to cover the epilogue in its own episode, plus the little short story at the end of this book. But with that, it is time for Phronimos.
So The way I was looking at it, Viv is a really good example of a phronimos, our model of practical wisdom.
So far, I actually think that Viv and Cal could be pulled out as models of practical wisdom, but I think that it's good to start with our protagonist.
That's kind of how I was feeling. So let's talk a little bit about what makes Viv such a great model here. So, first of all, she's got this open spirit to her. She really does truly look at the world for possibilities. She's willing to take her dreams seriously.
I think that that's such a beautiful thing.
She doesn't second guess her dreams. Like
She does.
well, let me put it this way. She shows some bravery around her dreams. She doesn't allow her second guessing to stop her from putting herself out there. She takes a risk on her dreams, knowing that there is a possibility that someone might mock her or that someone might judge her or might make light of her ideas.
But she doesn't do the thing that is so often instinctual, which is hold on to your dreams and not share them with others for fear of mockery.
Like, so it's that whole definition of bravery where it's not the absence of fear, but it's persistence through fear. She's afraid that Cal is going to judge her for her dreams or think it's silly, write it off as impossible. Instead, she takes the leap. And when she feels that fear, she does it anyway. She knows that she has thought long and hard about what it's going to take to make this into a reality. She's accepted the risks.
So, in that same way that someone who is like heavily tattooed can be afraid of needles, like for vaccinations and flu shots and stuff, this person who has this history of showing no fear in the face of physical danger is showing such vulnerability and a little bit of fear when showing her dreams off to her companions.
Yeah. And the thing also that I noticed here is that she's very wise about who she's chosen to confide in. When she goes to find a craftsperson to help her out, she recognizes that Cal is someone who is very careful in his work and is not too proud to do something that seems trivial. Like a dinghy is not some grand man o' war or merchant vessel or whatever. It's a small boat, but he's doing it with care, with dignity, with a pride of skill that even a small thing deserves that. And so when she interacts with him, again, all of his interactions show that he is someone who is careful with his thoughts. He's very deliberate in how he approaches things, and he doesn't respond rashly. He is modest in his estimations. He does not overpromise.
I like the tack of under promising and over delivering.
Yeah, he sets expectations pretty well. When he takes a look at the building, he says, okay, this is going to take a lot of work. But he doesn't say this in a mocking or derisive way. He just says, okay, this is a lot of work. I can do this. And so when Viv shows him her plans, his response is, well, you've got some good ambitions here. This is what you're going to need to do this. And he just starts laying out step by step what he's going to need to do this job. He's happy to have her help. He doesn't disparage the fact that she's not a quote professional.
There's something that's running through my head of how do you eat an elephant?
One bite at a time. Yeah, and he breaks it down into step by step things so it doesn't feel as daunting.
I'd like to say that that's my goal when we've done remodels of rooms. I don't want to look at the whole, I want to look at the pieces.
Yeah, and I think you've done a really good job of that.
And I think that that's why we've been successful.
Absolutely. And like I say, I think Viv has chosen someone who will work really well with her. And yeah, having that wisdom of knowing the right people are to confide in goes a long way. And so, yeah, that's why she's our Phronimos for today. So, with that, it's time for Thing of the Week. It's your turn.
I'm going to actually cheat a little bit and use a suggestion that you gave me, which is the new Wallace and Gromit movie, because I just have to stay with the cozy feel. Vengeance Most Fowl, which is a direct sequel to The Wrong Trousers. And Wallace and Gromit, like the claymation, the affable characters, the just I mean they're most everybody's kind of dumb, and the people that aren't dumb aren't listened to. Gromit. It just makes you have this camaraderie with Gromit, and they do such a fantastic job of making you care. And it's also very funny and gentle. And I gotta say, watching it with you was an absolute pleasure because you have such lovely memories of Wallace and Gromit from when you were growing up. And while I was familiar, I wasn't immersed in it and I didn't really have a lot of experience with it or with most of Aardman's animation. Like, I haven't seen many of their movies. I've seen a few Wallace and Gromit things, but not a whole lot, not everything, and not like I haven't devoured the whole catalog. Like, I'm familiar with Shaun the Sheep, and I am familiar with like Chicken Run and whatnot. But I think in this moment I'm finding myself in of wanting things to feel very cozy, Wallace and Gromit was such a good thing to come out right now. I'm bummed out that it's not in the theater, but I'm glad that I am able to see it on Netflix. Not a endorsement of Netflix, but in fact, actually, I think that they're dumb for not putting it in theaters. But it has some of the just best gags.
Yeah, a good Wallace and Gromit movie has a sight gag per minute ratio that is just through the roof.
It definitely does. The canal boats. Oh my goodness, the canal boats just Fast and the Fury. Nope.
Yeah, I always love just how much emotion can be conveyed through Gromit's eyebrows. Just how menacing Feathers McGraw can look just by blinking at something
Yeah.
with that glove on his head that makes him look like a chicken.
Uh, I don't want to give away too much of the plot, but let's just say that the whole movie is just delightful. There are some things that are like, nope, nope, no, 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 nope, for me, because the the garden gnomes, the garden gnomes are
Forking
creepy, man.
Yeah, but that's the desired effect, and I think it works.
I do too. But even the one that's supposed to look all friendly and not so creepy, it's just oh, mm-mm. I mean, I usually like cute and creepy, but oh,
That was just creepy.
that one's just creepy. It's like nightmare fuel.
But yes, like you were saying, Wallace and Gromit is something I grew up with. I was first exposed to them when I was in 7th grade, and I took an animation elective.
And I think that that's so cool.
So we learned how to do stop motion animation with clay and models and things like that. And we would watch a lot of examples, and Wallace and Gromit was one of the first things that we watched. I remember seeing The Wrong Trousers and just being blown away by just how expressive and inventive the whole thing was.
The thing that gets me so much is so Gromit knits and it looks like fabric that he's knitting. And it's not. It's somebody who has made this out of clay. And the textures and the detail, but not just that. You can see fingerprints from the way that they have to adjust the clay. And there's that much detail, there's that much love and care put into these movies and into these shorts and into these, TV length episodes. The amount of work put into it and the amount of love put into it.
And the amount of ingenuity.
Yes.
Like, they're not content to just have simple shots. Like, they are oftentimes doing complex point of view shots. They're using all sorts of crazy cinematic references to popular movies and tropes.
So many things to look for in the background and foreground.
And between like the elaborate Rube Goldberg machines that Wallace comes up with, and the way that Gromit can be endlessly expressive with just his ears and his eyebrows,
and his stature,
his posture. This is clearly a labor of love done by people who know what they're doing. They know their craft, and their goal is to make something that will delight people. And I think that's a really good recommendation that fits in with our theme here.
Yep.
So I think it's a good pick.
I'm glad that you suggested it.
Thank you. Well, that brings us to our 7 words.
You have the book.
I do. So I got a couple options here. The first one is what in the eight hells is coffee? Which is kind of just funny.
I absolutely love this because, like, at least the US, our warm beverage culture definitely is coffee. Like, I am an oddball for having a tea kettle. In fact, actually, though, to be honest, because it's a gooseneck, I'm just going to call it Fancy Pants, whatever. Our Fancy Pants kettle is designed more for slow pouring for coffee, but I have had a kettle for tea for ages. And most people in the US do not have kettles. They don't do that. They just, some heathens heat up their water in the microwave. I don't understand. It's so much better just to do it in a kettle. But like I really enjoy tea to the point where I get a tea advent calendar every year. There's something special about it, but coffee. Oh, the smell, the roasting, the way it all just feels lovely to inhale and to drink. The way that we have made cozy spaces out of coffee shops. Like my favorite dates with you are breakfasts at a coffee shop, especially the ones that are kind of eclectic, because I think that the coffee culture has kind of lent itself to that eclectic, that cozy couches and surrounding yourself with a warm, uplifting feeling.
Yeah, the lights are not too bright. They're just enough to make you feel warm and welcome. And all of the furniture feels lived in. And yeah, it's really nice. So, what I actually ended up choosing is kind of two for the price of one. It's an exchange. Both parts are 7 words. And I think putting them in concert with one another is just chef's kiss. It's like poetry, it rhymes. Not going to ask how much it'll cost. Do you even know yet?
This is true. Man, you can try to stay in budget. You try. Not going to happen.
Again, if you want to do something, you have to recognize that you're going to have to take risks.
And sometimes those risks are financial.
Sometimes it's going to take more than you are expecting, so you got to manage those expectations. And again, this is Cal being realistic in how this is going to work, and Viv also being realistic that she doesn't know either and doing it anyway. So you have words from life. What did you pick?
All right, I'm going to be real here. I'm pretty sure I've said this a few times because I know I've said it not on the podcast a few times. Sokka, our cat, does not let me sleep past, oh God, what time did he do it this morning?
I want to say it was like 4:30.
Yeah, I don't think I've slept an entire night past 4:30 in lost count, blue screened. Usually he wakes me up sometime between the hours of 1:30 and 4:30 by trying to knock over everything on my nightstand that is smaller than him because he knows it will wake me up. And I am not blessed with the gift of being able to go back to sleep, or at least not easily. And so today my 7 words are I need more coffee in my coffee.
Perfect for our theme here today.
Yes, I thought so too. This is in reference to the fact that I like to get extra shots of coffee in my coffee. I also generally don't prefer things to be ultra sweet. I like them to be at least somewhat bitter and then offset by the creamer and the sweetness. Today I had a lovely, lovely salted caramel latte at one of our favorite coffee shops, which does a really good breakfast also, and it just smells like roasty coffee, and it's so lovely, and I just, yeah.
Well, with that, I'd like to thank you for potting with me.
Thank you for potting with me as well.
And thanks for listening to Tales from the Waystone.
Summer reading program.
Join us next time as we continue the summer reading program with chapters 4 through 8 of Legends and Lattes.
We would like to thank our friend Shawnee Jang for our theme music.
And many thanks to Travis Baldree for creating this world that we've enjoyed exploring.
Audio production, editing, and social media coordination courtesy of me, Phoenix McCullough.
And writing and project management courtesy of me, Will McCullough.
And instead of plugging our Patreon, I would like to encourage any and every one of you to donate your money if you have extra, or if you can volunteer, or if you can do anything that would help with the situation in California with the wildfires in LA. Like one of the causes that's close to my heart, and the reason that we have Sokka, is because of the fires in 2018 that forced some animals out of animal shelters in Southern California. and they got dispersed northward toward Oregon and Washington. And we were living in Washington at the time and got Sokka from the Humane Society as a rescue from that. As much as I grouse about the poor little dude, I also absolutely love him. He spent most of last night while we were having our D&D session curled up on one of our chairs with his nose firmly planted in my slipper sock, hugging it and making everyone look over and go, "Aw."
The little dude loves your foot smell.
And so I would say, look to making a difference for some living creature or creatures. If you're going to donate to human causes, World Central Kitchen is definitely working to help. I know that there are a lot of other great charities and causes that are helping people who need homes, who need to have help figuring out how to navigate insurance if their insurance even covers fire. Need places to live, need places to send their kids to school because their schools burned down, resources, all that, and if your heart lies with our animal companions that have been displaced or harmed, there are humane societies and ASPCAs and whatnot that are in need of, pet fostering or, yeah. So if it's within your means, please consider, instead of doing something like following our Patreon or anything like that, please consider helping the people in need.
You can go to our Patreon for show notes and things like that, though. And of course, our Discord is a fun place to hang out. We'll have the link in the show description.
We're starting to get a slightly larger community in there. And, you know, I like to share memes. I like to share progress on our summer reading program choices. And if you want to have a say in what gets read next, please let us know what your preferences are. We like to hear from you.
We're also interested in hearing your thoughts on what we've just been reading. And since we're all kind of reading it together at this point, there's not as much established lore and such around all of this and theories around it. I'm interested in seeing just raw, unfiltered thoughts.
Absolutely. Definitely. I like just having regular book discussions. Not this thing's been out for, years and years and years and years with so many unanswered questions. More, hey, this is a cozy thing I wanted to read and I wanted to talk about it. Well, with that, here's to one more day above the roses.
To one more day above the roses.
Ding! We are starting our summer reading program on an appropriately sunny day.
It's summer somewhere.
Not here, but what's the temperature?
Like 37 Fahrenheit.
Anywhere that it would be summer right now does not measure in Fahrenheit.